A man was knocked to the ground. His neck was touched with the cold chill of a sword, his blood-stained eyes filled with bottomless hatred. Standing across from him was a man wearing a black robe, a clearly extraordinary-looking man, but his slightly raised lips revealed 12,000 points of evil. The handsome man's heart was barking, "Kill him, kill him," but the hand holding the sword was motionless. Instead, he started rambling about the past, from how he destroyed the man's family, strangled the man's parents and siblings, retelling all the persecution he'd inflicted on the man these past years. "Stop talking nonsense. Kill him and talk later." The handsome man's heart let out a loud roar. When he was finally able to control himself and raise his sword, the horse was spared by him, and the woman lying to the side, who should have been on the verge of death, suddenly rose, grabbing a wicked sharp dagger and stabbing it into the middle of his back. He turned his head slowly, not daring to believe, his dark eyes filled with love, hate, and strong unwillingness. "I'm sorry," the woman choked out, this long and drawn-out vengeful war finally coming to an end. But the villain's death didn't mean the end, but the beginning of everything. The handsome man who should have died was now standing in a vast sea of stars, his black robe replaced with skin-tight clothing, staring at the watch on his wrist. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a watch, but an AI. The man was called Ho Yun Sheng. Originally, he lived in the high-tech world of 2458 and was one of the top hackers. One day, when he finished a transaction on the Star Network and was about to log out, he was sucked into a different dimension called the Lord God Space by an existence similar to a black hole. There, he was loaded with a villain system, then set foot on the path of the villain, torn bodies and crushed bones, destined to die a miserable death. He obviously knew that he should not touch the male lead's woman, should not steal the male lead's treasures, should not bully the male lead's little brother, should not suppress the male lead's family, but he was under the system's control, and had no choice but to do extremely stupid things, eagerly rushing down a road that only lead to death. Even more frustrating, whenever he had the opportunity to stab, slash, or shoot to get rid of the male lead, the system would input a large paragraph of dialogue for him read. After that, he realized there would always be someone silently waiting behind him, ready to stab him with a knife. It was inevitable. Ho Yun Sheng looked handsome, even when he wasn't smiling. His mouth always had a slight upward tilt, showing that he should be a gentle man. However, he was in fact the opposite. He was insidious, good at disguises, and his desire for control was very intense. A person who usually treated the network as a plaything became a system pawn. That kind of huge psychological gap stirred up the ruthlessness hidden in the deepest depths of his heart. He wanted vengeance, vengeance on the Lord God. If he was an ordinary person, maybe he would search for clues in each traversal, or cooperate with the system, slowly enhancing his strength, then probing out the Lord God's origin, attempting to destroy it. However, Ho Yun Sheng was a hacker. No one knew the essence of data better than hackers. If it could be the world's most orderly, most exact, most stable machine, it could also be the most chaotic, most out of control, the most vulnerable existence. And in this virtual world, the omnipotent Lord God was actually just a set of data. If you wanted to destroy it, maybe you didn't need overwhelming power. You only needed a snippet of muddling code, commonly known as a virus. From the beginning, Ho Yun Sheng intended to turn himself into a virus, one that existed within the Lord God's system, so that it couldn't detect, couldn't control, and more importantly, couldn't eliminate the virus. Compared to the Lord God's huge CPU, he was just a string of insignificant code, but this code could cause permanent damage to wherever it flowed. One day, these injuries would overlap, becoming significant enough to paralyze the Lord God system. Then, when the time came, no matter how, he would be able to return to the real world, alive. Everything he went through already put behind him. He was looking forward to that prospect, very satisfied. Now, Ho Yun Sheng was fiddling with the AI on his wrist. It was a gift from the Lord God, the villain system. The system had its own code name, 007, very sentimental. and its voice was also a Lolita voice, the most favored among otaku. It was responsible for issuing the tasks assigned by the Lord God. If the task was failed, it was also responsible for issuing punishment, and when the host was disobedient, it could temporarily control their body. If necessary, the host would be obliterated. If he was an ordinary person, perhaps he would hate this system to the bone. But Ho Yun-sheng felt otherwise. The moment he received the AI, he exercised all control to suppress his heart's ecstasy and excitement. He was a hacker. Just give him a computer, and he would be able to conquer the world. And so, the Lord God provided him the handiest tool. After countless reincarnations on this day, when he finally completed the villain mission, he wasn't sent back to the Lord God's pure white room. Rather, he came to this vast, black sea of stars. 007 was broken through by the virus program he'd implanted, and the system that once threatened him was completely obliterated. 007 was now unable to issue tasks. It couldn't speak, and it couldn't control the host's body. It became a precision instrument controlled by the host. Ho Yun-sheng stretched out his fingertips, slowly debugging the AI, his twinkling eyes filled with delight. The vast galaxy in front of him was a secret space created by 007. He could evade the Lord God's omnipresent monitoring. Here was very safe, very charming. It was his shelter. He wandered through the galaxy, held a bright star in front of himself to observe, then gently put it back. This seemingly vast expanse of universe was in reality a place where anything could be reached with a thought. The so-called powerful didn't mean physical strength, but spiritual. Ho Yun-sheng laughed quietly. He placed his fingertips on his wrist, and immediately disappeared into the sea of stars. He couldn't wait to pollute the Lord God's perfect world. He opened his eyes once again. Ho Yun-sheng found himself lying on a soft king-sized bed. Above his head was a snow-white ceiling and a gorgeous crystal lamp. He half sat up and found that the AI, which was bound to his soul, was now quietly encircling his wrist. Uninterrupted writing emerged on the display. It was detailed data about this new body, stolen from the Lord God's system, in order to conduct himself as a virus capable of evading the Lord God's monitoring. Ho Yun-sheng naturally wouldn't attach himself to the main players in the dimension. In other words, the male and female protagonists, as accurately calculated by 007. His best choice was to become data that would be destroyed sooner or later, commonly known as cannon fodder. Changing the fate of cannon fodder, although it wouldn't lead to the collapse of the dimension, it would cause an error in the Lord God's calculations. One data error could give rise to a series of data errors. After he leaves, the world would already be out of the Lord God's control. Like in the gray area of a brain, although it looked okay, it was actually already necrotic. And the more this gray area multiplied, the brain would sooner or later be paralyzed. This was the result Ho Yun-sheng ultimately wanted. After reading the information, the corner of his mouth raised slightly as he ruminated. This body was 16 years old, also called Ho Yun-sheng, and he was the Ho group's first son. He was a first-year student, and had two younger brothers in third year of middle school, both 15 years old, one called Ho Wenning, and the other was called Ho Wenjing. On the surface, Ho Wenning was Ho Yun-sheng's full sibling, but in reality, he was a child from his father's mistress' true love, substituted into the family during his mother's postnatal weakness. Ho Yun-sheng's real brother died at birth because of hypoplasia of the heart. On the other hand, Ho Wenjing was born from the female university student, who was sponsored by Ho mother. That woman was an orphan, and she was kind-hearted. Racked with guilt over Ho mother, she fell into depression soon after she gave birth, and slit her wrist and committed suicide a few years later. The body was discovered by Ho mother. It's unknown whether that stimulated her, but a year later, she jumped into the sea, her dead body unrecoverable. The protagonist of this world was Ho family's second son Ho Wenjing. He was suppressed by the family from childhood, and persecuted by his brothers. Then he finally counterattacked and became a business emperor. He defeated countless opponents, experienced one thrilling trade war after another, then finally ascended to the pinnacle of power and wealth. As for Ho Yun-sheng, he was merely another small stumbling block in his life path. He couldn't even be called an opponent. Of Ho family's 3 sons, the first was calm and sophisticated, the second son was eccentric, and the third son was simple and straightforward. However, the first son, who looked the most outstanding and shrewd, was in reality the most stupid. He treated Ho Wenning as a full-blooded younger brother, taking care of him to the point of stupidity. He even bullied Ho Wenjing under the other's instigation, and the obviously partial Ho father didn't interfere. Under Ho father's deliberate guidance, he became a defensive shield for Ho Wenning. In the end, he not only had to bear Ho Wenjing's revenge, even his share of the family property was stolen by Ho Wenning. He was destitute for all his life and died miserably. This was simply a standard cannon fodder role. After reading the information, Ho Yunsheng lazily stretched his waist, then walked to the huge French window to bask in the morning sun. His more accurate than 007 brain was rapidly calculating how best to change the fate of the original owner. Since he was here, he would seriously face life, not treating it as an imaginary world, and not treating it irreverently like a game. This was a world created by the Lord God. It was an aggregate of countless data, different from a heterodimensional space in the real world. However, he was also a string of data, more specifically, the codified creation of a soul. So to him, the worlds felt no different from the real thing. The heartache born of the anger of betrayal, and the pain of being killed again and again. They were not inferior to the real world. In fact, because the memories were deeply rooted in his soul, they were even more profound than reality. He didn't want to be a puppet for the Lord God to fiddle with again. Since he was here, he would do everything in his abilities to subvert fate and live for himself. At this moment, the sun hid behind the clouds, and the smooth glass windows reflected the teenager's handsome and determined face. "Sheng Xiao, breakfast is ready, time to get up." Just then, the nanny knocked on the door. Ho Yunsheng put away his determined spirit. Ray hung a gentle and elegant smile, then followed the original owner's memory to change into his school uniform, running downstairs for breakfast after washing up. In the dining room, Shou father was sitting in the main position, reading the newspaper. Shou Wenning was lying on his shoulder, his neck stretched out. When he saw Ho father about to flip the page, he quickly pressed down the newspaper, shouting out that he wasn't done reading. Ho father just smiled helplessly, then lovingly pinched the tip of his son's nose. This kind of tenderness, did the eldest son Ho Yunsheng ever receive that? But he was brainwashed by Ho father to always think that the best of everything should be given to his younger brother. Taking care of his brother was his duty. Take care, huh? The current Ho Yunsheng would naturally take good care of Ho Wenning. The corners of his mouth raised up, making the smile on his face appear more gentle and sincere. Ho Yunsheng sat on Ho father's left, indifferently glancing at Ho Wenjing, whose head was lowered in thoughts only he could know. "Sheng Xiao, drink a glass of milk every day." Shou father's personal assistant, Zhu Lang, came out from the kitchen and placed a cup of steaming milk in front of him, blocking his view of Ho Wenjing. Ho Yunsheng's smile deepened, his dark eyes quickly flashing a sharp light. He almost forgot. His current opponent in the Ho family wasn't only the protagonist Ho Wenjing. There was also the male supporting actor, Zhu Lang. Without him, Shou Wenjing would not have become so overwhelmingly powerful in 10 years. Basically, he was Ho Wenjing's gold finger, his biggest cheat.